Well, jolly good. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Very good afternoon to you all. My name is Dr. Steve Kershaw, and I've been part of the department since 20 years or so. I work out of the archaeology department in this department, but on false pretenses, because I'm not an archaeologist, really. I'm a historian, linguist, really. So I deal fundamentally with dead languages and the people who don't speak them anymore. That's my kind of thing. So I do. I'm running courses in Latin and in Greek. I have a really nice historical course on the barbarians, which is running next time in the face-to-face environment. And I also teach and write courses in the online environment as well, which is essentially where this Phaistos disc thing comes from. Because, as I say, I'm the author and tutor of a course on the Minoans and the Mycenaeans that this forms part of. Also on the fall of Rome and on Greek mythology. So there's all this kind of stuff out in the online environment as well. And I also teach parts of the modules on a very wonderful Masters in Literature and Arts course, where I sort of explore my interest in collectors of classical antiquities. So those are the kind of things that I do for the department. And fundamentally this is, I'm very keen that I might be able to attract you to some of the face-to-face weekly classes. But also I think it might be good to say something about these online courses as well, because I think the way that these operate is often misunderstood. The sort of the way that we operate here it isn't like a lot of these things that they call MOOCs, where you just sit in front of a lecture screen and get talked at by someone for an hour whenever you feel like it. The things are highly interactive and very relevant, I think. I sort of just dug this up from one of our textbooks, but when you think about it, you go into the Bronze Age and the world of the Minoans and the Mycenaeans. We also start to learn stuff about ourselves as well, not just about them. There's so much to be extracted from it, and these authors rightly say, I think, that this picture that we have of the Bronze Age Aegean is in no small measure a 21st century artifact. You know, we make it, tailored to, understandable within the frameworks of the social needs, the attitudes, and of the modern social and historical interpretation. I think this is good and it's interesting. For me as a historian, this is a great thing where the past is constructed and read or made sense of in and for the present. Very much so. It may be in the dim and dark past, but it's very relevant to now. And that's something I think that's always very much motivated me as a historian. And this is what the sort of screens of the online course look like. The online courses work in a 10-week unit. They last for 10 weeks, and within each week there's a new topic, and we explore all sorts of different facets, in this case of the Minoan and the Mycenaean world. So this is typically one of the pages that you would arrive on your computer screen if you were signed up for that. And I think this shows the way it works rather nicely, is that you have access to all sorts of extra resources that are made available to you through the university's archives. So there will be images and a variety of different activities that you do. So you're essentially throughout these courses, say, not being preached to all the time, but being suggested, go read this, go research that, go and look at the other. Bring it back, discuss it amongst your peers within the course, and I, as your tutor, will, if you like, intervene and direct those discussions as you go. It can't happen in real time because there'll be people from all over the world there. So there'll be people in Australia and California and all places in between. So it sort of evolves in a set of discussions. So you will have, on this particular screen, you probably can't read it from where you are, but you're invited to, in an optional activity about the Phaistos disc. You don't have to do this. Some are more compulsory than others, but if you've got the time, then you do this. To read sections from the couple of textbooks that you've got, and then you can watch a slide cast, which is essentially a lecture with slides that I've built, which is very similar to what I'll present to you today. And then you're invited to discuss amongst yourselves in different ways. So all the time there's this sort of heavy interaction with your fellow students, which certainly for me worked out I was skeptical about it when I first got involved, but I thought that I ought to, because this is where education is going in a sense. But it does operate very effectively. It's a good learning environment. And what's interesting, I think, about the students is that they behave exactly like you would do in a real life seminar. Is that some of you would be sitting right down at the front, you know, keen as anything, doing all the exercises, asking questions, you know, contributing in the fora. Others of you lurking at the back, you know, maybe just handing your assignments as you go. But everyone can sort of take part in these things and enjoy these courses in the way that they would normally do in a, if you like, in a real life environment. It's really quite interesting, I think. The only thing I think I miss about this is that I can't smell my students in the environment. You know, this is my preferred one, I think. But this is how it works. So we at this point we're in the middle of a module on Phaistos, the palace. And one of the things that we can do is that we can create videos for you. And this is one of the things from the course. So here you have a plan of the Phaistos Palace, an indication of where the video is being shot from, and it comes with a voiceover. But now, you know, you may not have been able to visit the Palace of Phaistos, but here you are. You can essentially walk through it with me into this theatral area. You can see the grand staircase. You can pause it whenever you like, but we'll have a different shot here from the stairs of the theatral area with the grand staircase over to our right. And so we've got visually these courses, this one in particular, incredibly powerful, is that we can very much take you to these places, show you through them, and give you as far as we can an immersive experience. We obviously can't take you on a field trip to Phaistos, but this is something that we can do. We can show you where we've been taking the videos from and take you there to this, you know, fascinating place. So, you know, that's just part of it. We can show you slides. We can direct you to other websites that have videos and resources and what have you, and so it goes. So we have, in this particular environment, I mean, if actually in a face-to-face class I'd probably show you videos like this anyway, but indeed I would, but you know, here you can go and explore and have a commentary as you go and get a feel for these places. And it was in this palace area, this whether it's a palace or not is open to discussion, and that's one of the things that we would discuss as I kind of walk around now with my video camera as we go. But within this, up at, just off the top of the screen at the top, there was a remarkable thing happened. It was the evening of the 3rd of July 1908, and this very intriguing ceramic disc was discovered in a small room. Here's a plan of the room. At the very northeast corner of this Minoan palace, in inverted commas, complex. If you want the technical side of it, it was chamber 8 of building XL/101, to be precise. And this thing was lying at a slight angle. It was about 50 centimetres above floor level in what seems to have been an ancient temple depository. And it was lying there amongst ashes and burnt bovine bones and various shards of pottery, which also included one of the Linear A tablets that will become part of our interests on the course, but which haven't yet been deciphered. So it was here, it was in this little part of the building. The disc was there, the tablet was lying next to it. So the disc looked like that, and the tablet, transcribed, looked like this. We can work out bits about what was on the tablet. These are numbers. These are tens that we know. This is 100, and that little dot's a half. So there's 90 odd of something there, and there's 100 and a half of something else. But we can enjoy aspects of that. But the big interest fell in this artifact here, this disc, and it's interesting how it comes about, because according to the notebook of the Italian field director at Phaistos at the time, in 1908, it was a man called Luigi Pernia, and the disc, he says, hadn't been noticed during the regular excavations of the room. It had, bless you, it had been identified, in his words, in inverted commas, by the foreman, who was a man called Zacharias Iliakis, when the foreman was making his sort of evening control inspection of the site, and he found it at 7 o'clock at night. Strange, in a sense. And this thing, the Phaistos disc, as it's come to be called, it's a really intriguing discovery, partly because it seems to be very much a one-off. You know, it's the one and only clay disc of this kind that's been unearthed anywhere in these kind of contexts. And, you know, so 1908, and so for over a century, serious scholars and enthusiastic amateurs have been poring over it and its significance and its meaning, with, up till now, I've got to say, absolutely no consensus about the date, the origin, the meaning, or indeed the authenticity of it. So it's a wonderful enigma for us. So let me tell you what it's like. Here, one of the other things we can do, I think that's very valuable, is that these are a set of photographs taken by the department, especially for the online course. This isn't the original thing, sadly, that I'm holding in my hands here. It's a cast of it. But casts are really valuable. You know, they allow us to get good experiences of things, to see what, you know, kind of how they. It's a cast off the original. So this is, you know, how they feel, how they weigh, what they look like. They're portable. You can take them around. You can do things with them that you can't do with an artifact that's in a museum case, which is particularly something that's as rare and controversial like that. So that kind of shows you the size of it. This is very nice, isn't it? It's irregularly circular. The diameter, if you want, I mean, you can see how big it is really from that, but the diameter is between 15.8 and 16.5 centimetres. It fits really nicely, very satisfyingly into your hand. It's clearly handmade as well. The surface is fairly smooth, but the thickness varies between 1.5 and 2 centimetres roughly. And it's made from a very high quality, fine-grained clay. And unlike that Linear A tablet that it was found with, it's been the Linear A tablet was burnt accidentally and was sort of fired hard in a conflagration that took place in the palace. So it was fired, if you like, the tablet was fired accidentally. The disc was not. It was fired deliberately. It wasn't baked hard in one of these accidental fires. It's perfectly done. It's, if you like, the product of not of a historical accident, but of something that's entirely deliberate. And the archaeological context of it suggests that it was probably buried on purpose, again, and not accidentally. So interesting stuff about it. Now, the date and origin of it are difficult, and if you study the Minoan and Mycenaean world, then the dates of things are a problem, and they are controversial, really controversial. The way that they do it is that they have 3 different periods. So they have, in the Minoan period, early, middle, and late. Each of those is divided into 1, 2, and 3. Some of those phases are divided into A and B, and the late Minoan one also has some numbers. So you get things at late Minoan 3A1 or something like that. That won't necessarily tell you what the date is, because people argue like crazy about what the absolute dates of these are. The sequence of events is generally pretty clear, but the actual absolute dates often very, very difficult to pinpoint. But and the dating of this particular piece is problematical, and there's extreme ranges of dates that have been suggested for it. Often these, I think, lack archaeological credibility, but some people want to push them back as old as 2100 BC, and some of them want it as recent as 1100. Broad consensus, which goes back to Pernier, the site director there, puts it in what we call the Neo-Palatial period, the New Palace period, about Middle Minoan 3. So towards the end of this, with a date maybe of 1700 to 1600 on the conventional chronologies anyway. But there's dispute about this, and we always dispute things in this case. It's great fun. Some scholars want it to go back to the earlier Middle Minoan 2 phase. even before this palace was constructed, where we know that the building where the things were found were certainly in use. And of course the disc could have been made before it was stored, so it could be older than the place that it was found. On the other hand, other people want to bring the date closer to us, a more recent date, on the grounds that two of the signs, one of which is this one, which they call the ship, like a ship on its side, if you like. So the sea would be, the sea is here. What they call the ship, whether it's a ship or not, we're not sure. There's another one that they call the tun-shell snail as well, and those signs don't appear on other Minoan contexts and artifacts prior to late Minoan 1. So people want to make it more recent to us. This is interesting. And so people want it, more recent, and the advocates of the middle Minoan dates sort of counter that more recent dating theory by bringing out this which is called the Arkalochori Axe. And you might just be able to make out that there are some symbols down the middle of it. Can you see these here? So they are transcribed. Really rather interesting. It's this double axe. It was excavated in 1934, so after the disc was found, in the Arkalochori cave in central Crete by Spiridon Marinatos, one of the superstar archaeologists of this period. And it has 15 symbols on it in these 3 columns. So here are the symbols. These are the symbols on the axe, and these are some of the symbols that are on the disc. So you can see there are some superficial similarities. I know there's some pursing of lips and it's funny, isn't it? It's that some people want to see that as really similar, and then others would say, oh no, they're not similar at all. So that's interesting. But certainly one of the things that's entered this argument is these signs that have, at least if you want to see them, a superficial resemblance to the signs on the disc. And the context of the axe would suggest a middle Minoan period if that works. So interesting stuff going on. We'll come back to this as well. We'll discuss a bit later. But the find spot of the disc. This is the disc. This is not a cast now. So this is in the Heraklion Archaeological Museum. The find spot is indisputably Minoan, that's fine. But that, of course, doesn't necessarily mean that the disc came from Crete in the first place. It could have come from somewhere else. And all sorts of different theories have brought it in from Rhodes, from Cyprus, from southwestern Anatolia, from Egypt, from mainland Greece, or, again, on the basis that on the disc, this sort of kind of slightly Mohican-looking thing that they call the feathered head. Here, this one, they suggest that might resemble a helmet that was worn, a special type of helmet worn by the Philistines. So again, there's maybe, has it got this is the question mark that goes over the top of it. Was this something that was coming from the eastern, the far of the eastern Mediterranean? Other views suggest more generically Aegean, if not specifically from Crete, maybe Minoan, maybe even Mycenaean. But generally, again, it has to be, in a sense, purely speculative at this point. That said, let's say that the weight of scholarly opinion tends to come down on the side of Cretan origin. Again, with the making comparisons with the Arkalochori Axe coming in, Marinatos, the great excavator there, certainly regarded the axe and the disc as cultural artifacts of the same type. And this feathered head symbol, again, it's similar, not identical, but similar to, as well as the axe heads, but also to these sort of funny little things, these the heads of 3 clay statues that were found in a cave on Crete at Traostalos near Katazakros on the eastern side of Crete, which at least show you that the crest, which you can just see at the top of the head, this crest here, shows you that the crest was at least not exclusively non-Minoan. So I think we've got to be very circumspect about this. I think the stance of the American classicist Alice Kober, who did invaluable work, I don't know if you know, on the decipherment of linear B. Maybe her way is the best to go there. She says that the disc's origin ought to be regarded as Cretan until the opposite is proved. Maybe you like that, maybe you don't, but that's what she suggests. So origins, dates, difficult. The disc itself, though, we can certainly say quite a bit about. So it's printed on both sides, and the two sides, once you get your eye in, are quite easy to tell apart. They're known as side A, which you're looking at here, and obviously side B. Side A is, you can tell it mainly by the central figure. You've got this sort of 8-petaled rosette that's in the middle, so that's what you got in the middle of that. You've got a different set of symbols in the middle of the B side, which are here. This one. This particular sign, they can't make up their mind what it is. It occurs quite a lot here. They generally call it the helmet or breast sign. Take your pick. Might be neither, but that's what it's come to be called. So that's what you got with that. So here's the two things side by side. There's 45 different signs on the disc. There's a total of 242 impressions that have been made into it, because this has been stamped. There's 123 on the A side, and there's 119 on the B. On both sides, you can see that this sort of pictographic inscription evolves in a spiral band that moves either into or out of the centre. There, and there's a little step in it as well. You can see there's sort of a little here. It kind of goes, either it starts or ends here, and goes that way, or it comes out and then goes around there. You know. So that's kind of how it works. The spiral band. So the spiral that's been drawn on the disc, which is provides a kind of a baseline, if you like, which most scholars assume was engraved freehand into the soft clay, and they think it was done from the outside to the inside with various interruptions. But as I say, there's this problem: should we be reading from the centre to the rim, so in other words, left to right, as it would be? Or should we read inwards and read it right to left? There's all sorts of good and bad arguments for both of those. They hinge on aspects like the overlap of certain signs with others, and the direction of movement of the figures. But direction of movement, the way that they appear to be looking, doesn't necessarily mean that the text is going that way. There certainly are, texts like this that where the text is going in the opposite direction to where figures appear to be moving. So it's not a decisive argument there. So none of these are decisive. But that's the spiral. And then within the spiral, these signs are grouped into various little segments, groups of varying size, by these vertical lines here, these ones. So they're sort of segmented off from each other. They call them field dividers, those. And on the A side, there are 31 groups, and on the B side, there are 30. And the size of the groups varies from 2 signs to 7. So what do these represent? Do they represent words, or sentences, or paragraphs, or verses? That's again subject to debate. How you number the signs depends on whether you start from the inside or the outside. Again, so Arthur Evans, the great archaeologist, obviously with his Oxford connections here, labels the sign groups on the A side, for instance, from the middle, from the rosette. He calls that A1, and then A2, 3, 4, and then B1, 2, 3. Other scholars label it the other way around. So A Roman, 31 in Roman numerals at the outside. So different ways that you can do it. But that's how they're divided up. And I think a number of things become apparent immediately once you start to look close in. The vast majority of them, as you can see there, are oriented towards the right, aren't they? So the one that they call the man here, he's walking to the right. The feathered head is looking to the right. There, that's so they're looking in the direction of the outer part of the spiral. But the fish, they're standing up on their tails. They're not swimming to left or right. They're just standing upright. They don't swim either way. And the ship, which we looked at before, that doesn't seem to float in either direction or anything. It seems to stand on on one end. It just stands vertically. So interesting. But that's how they work. Secondly, these pictographs are generally speaking orientated vertically, so that the guy's got his feet on the baseline or close to that's the baseline. He's got his feet on the baseline. So they're generally speaking orientated vertically, sort of towards the outer edge of the disc is how they work. So that we can say about them. Thirdly, you can see, quite clearly, again, once you start to look at it, that the signs aren't equally distributed on both sides either. For instance, there's a thing called the round shield sign. There, all over the place on side A. Hardly at all. There's one there, but not very many on side B. So there's not an equal distribution of the signs there. For instance, and 21 of the signs only appear on one side, and 9 of them only appear once. So this is hard to work out. So there's all these figures, but there's also some other signs as well. Can you see here this? These strokes or dashes, sort of oblique lines, and they always go in that direction, upper left to bottom right. Underneath, always, when they occur, the left-hand sign of the group, if you're looking at it that way. These are hand-drawn. They're not printed like the pictographs are, so there's something different about them. But, what's going on here? Deliberate? Accidental? Hard to tell. Do they indicate the start or the end of a word group, maybe? Do they only apply to the group of signs that's in that little box? Do they indicate, again, a word, a sentence, a stanza? Do they modify the syllable that they're attached to? What's going on? Again, really, really hard to tell. And also, we've got a bunch of dotted bars. Not a bunch of them, just 2. Sort of at the same place here. Radial lines with dots or globules on them, running from the outside edge to the beginning or the end, wherever you're reading, of the spiral baseline. So, what are these? Are they meaningful? Are they meaningless? Are they ornamental? Do they mark the start or the end of the text? Also, side B, it's the one on the right, there definitively has 5 dots on it. But side A is a bit messy. And so this is a cast, remember, but side A is a bit messy. And there's actually dispute about whether the very outside mark on that is a smaller dot or whether it's just something else. It's not a dot. So whether there's actually 4 and 5. And if there are 4 and 5, it raises an interesting question. Is then the one with 4 dots chapter 4 and the other one chapter 5, maybe, therefore implying the difference, the possible existence of other discs that we haven't got? Or is it a complete red herring? Very difficult to know. And then, check these out. There's also a number of what you might call corrections or alterations on the disc. So something's gone on here. Some of the pictographs have been rubbed out, like you can see on the left, the middle one here, and replaced with something else. This is what we call A24, that's on the left, and A27 on the right. Those were first picked up early in the study of the disc by a scholar called Alessandro della Seta in 1909. and more corrections have been postulated since. And what you can see in both of these is how the scribe or someone has changed the original text by taking away or leveling the outline of one of the stamps and then overprinting it with a new one. So on the left, we've added this, what they call the round shield stamp on there. And on the one on the right, at 27, you've got another example which shows you, again, this round shield stamp overlapping with the figure here who's often called the prisoner. If he's a prisoner or not is, again, hard to tell. But so there's been corrections made to this as well, modifications. Interesting. And interestingly, and rather enigmatically, I think, 6 new round shield stamps of that type have been added in various places, so 6 different places on that side. And each of those is adjacent to the feathered head sign. So here's one down the bottom, the round shield with the feathered head. Round shield, feathered head. Round shield, feathered head. Round shield, feathered head. And so on. Quite interesting how that's working out. So what's going on here? Is there something special about that? Those are always, as well, either at the, depending on which way you're reading the text, either at the end or at the beginning of the sign. They're always there in the sign. At the end, that one the same, that one the same. So interesting. What's going on here? Is that a clue? Can we get something out of that? No unanimity, that's for sure. There's also a lack of unanimity in the discussions about how many layers the disc might or might not have been made out. Is it all one piece, or was it made in 2 different things and stuck together, or 3 of them around with a central piece and 2 outside? And there's a major difficulty about the order in which the signs and the field dividers and the spiral lines were written. And close analysis of the disc doesn't really shed any light on the process, unfortunately, and neither do we know whether the engraver worked from the outside in or the inside out. Again, very difficult. What would be really nice to find is a stamp, the actual things that they use to make the stamps, but it hasn't. No stamp has been found. But they must have been relief images in a fairly hard material. Everything from wood to gold has been suggested in this. And there's a certain amount of ongoing debate about whether more than one stamp was used for each symbol. There's a number of these, what they call glove signs here, and there's a dispute about actually whether they were made by the same implement, which is interesting as well, I think. And neither do we know, of course, how many people might have been involved in creating it. Did one person make it, another one, shape it, another one make the tool, another one stamp it, another one proof check it, another one correct it. What's going on? How many people are involved in this? We don't know. But certainly the questions that you can ask about this raise interesting issues. I think about the entire social and economic context in which it was created. So, the problems are open portals in other interesting directions. So, what about these signs themselves? Again, here we are back in Crete, looking at the, as you will now know, side B. Lots of challenges in interpreting these different pictographic signs. So what might they represent? Are they alphabetic? So each sign stands for a vowel or a consonant, and they spell words. Tricky one, that I think. The early date of this and the large number of signs that we have seems to tell against it being an alphabet, I think. So are they syllables? And the scripts on Crete around this time were syllabic. So does each of these fields make an individual word? That's the majority view. Or are they pictograms or logograms? Where the signs mean what they depict. Or do they stand for a concept, with no necessarily connection between the pictograph and the phonemes of the word? So for instance, here we have what's conventionally called the woman sign. Here, what does that mean? Does that stand for the concept of a woman, if you like, but not the actual word, WOMAN? if that's correct, then maybe each sign would represent one or more words. Each sign group would be a clause or a sentence, and the inscription would then be a very long text. Interesting. Or again, could it be a combination? Could it be a combination of alphabetic, syllabic, and pictographic things? Again, that's a possibility. Again, look at the sign here that they call the man. He's number 1 sign. Looks like what's he look like? Walking, marching man, wearing a short loincloth, a little kilty kind of loinclothy thing. Hard to tell what kind of garment that is, actually. Is it a Minoan style garment? Well, if it was Minoan, I'd want a codpiece with it as well, because they tended to wear that kind of thing. Or is it Mycenaean, or is it something else? What is he? Where does he come from? What's he doing? What's he wearing? And what does it all mean, that figure? So there he is. Could it mean what it looks like, perhaps? A man, or a walker, or a wanderer, or a pedestrian, or a traveller, something like that. Or could it be a verb associated with that? So could it mean, walking, wandering, I don't think pedestrianing, travelling, whatever. Could it be that? Or does it represent a syllable that maybe has a phonetic value that's the same as the first syllable of the word that the sign describes? So if it were in English, say, not a man, but ma, or wa, or pe, or tra, as in, man, wandering, travelling, something like that. Could it be that? Or does it just stand for a letter, MWPT, something like that? Really difficult. What I can say is that you've got multiple possibilities of misunderstanding. That's the way it works. Same question applies. An interesting sign here. It's down here. What looks like a bird with some prey. Here it is again. Here it is again. But this is interesting as well. The bird sign's a bit of an enigma. Universally, it's felt to be a flying bird holding its catch in its talons or its claws. But what kind of a bird, we don't know. Eagle, falcon, something else? Difficult. And what's the prey? Snake, something, maybe, something else. And why does it only not just appear flying to the right, which it does with the prey dangling beneath it, but also flying to the left, it's flying up, as it is here, and sometimes it's flying upside down, with the prey sort of dangling upwards. Very strange, and does the orientation of it affect the meaning of it in that case? So does it mean bird, or flying, or catching prey, or does it stand for a syllable, or a letter, or none of those? Very hard to tell. And then there's this. Very baffling. Triangular sign here just appears on side B. Triangle, so standing on one of its points, the bottom of it is here, this is the baseline, so it's standing on one of its points. And it's got 27 dots inside it, which are arranged in rows of, if you go from the right side to the left corner, 7, 6, 5, 5, 3, and 1. What is it? Is it a sieve? Something to do with female sexuality? But if it's female sexuality, why are there only 27 dots? I'd want 28, wouldn't you? So is it alphabetic, syllabic, pictographic? What is it? Lots and lots of different things. So we've got issues. So what language is it then? How do we interpret this? What language is it written in? Might it be written in? And what does it say? Is it Greek? Is it Luwian? Luwian was the language probably spoken at Troy in the Bronze Age, for instance. Hittite, which you might call Nisite or Neshite. Something Semitic, perhaps. The same language as Linear A, but we don't know what that language was. But could it be that? Whatever that might be. Or indeed something completely different. And certainly now when it comes to decipherment, the opinions become all the more divergent. Sir Arthur Evans made no claim whatsoever to being able to decipher this, but he hazarded a guess that it was a hymn to the earth goddess. That was his thing. And there's a more recent attempt, which has been trumpeted in the media. I'm not sure whether the scholars would have liked the way it was done, but it was trumpeted in the media under a headline, "Scientists finally crack the code of the ancient Phaistos disc." The only thing missing for that is mysterious. You know, when there's anything in the popular press about archaeology, it's always mysterious, isn't it? Everything is mysterious. Not here. But they concur to an extent about this. It was Gareth Owens and John Coleman. They're working out at the Technological Educational Institute in Crete and out of Oxford University as well. And they feel that they can at least identify 3 key words on it from these symbols down here. So Ike, which might be mother and or goddess, occurs a lot of times on the disc. Or Ikekuria, which they think possibly could be pregnant mother or pregnant goddess. And then another one that they're not entirely sure, Ikepaye or Ikefaye. Particularly the fire comes into ancient Greek as shining, phaethon, and other things like that. So perhaps shining mother or shining goddess, perhaps. That's some of the things that they put that forward. They're quite circumspect. They're much less confident than their headline writers in the newspapers. But there's all sorts of others out there, loads of people out there, rather less circumspectly claiming to have solved the mystery with alternative deciphering methods. And it is read as, amongst other things, a dated judicial court list with the names of magistrates and witnesses, musical notes, an index of a religious pilgrimage, an adventure story, a poetic verse, poem, a magic curse, a board game, a call to the Minoans to embark on an expedition against the Carians in southwestern Turkey these days, a greeting by Talao, the king of the Philiaigetians. It's a difficult one to pronounce. These people of mainland Greece to the Cretan population following an earthquake. Or, this is my favourite one by miles, the description of a sexual fertility ritual in the Phaistos palace. This is how it works. This is so great. I'm not going to give you all of it. I'm just going to give you the second half of the B-side. So they're starting here. This is This is Kjell Artun, who put this forward in 1992. So he wants to read it from the centre outwards, left to right, thinks it's a Semitic text. And here you are starting at this symbol on side B, and you can all chant along this ritual. I just love this. You know, I was always taught when I was translating Greek or Latin, if it sounds wrong, it probably is. But this is what he comes up with. My one filled with soft desire, penetrate the soft ground. Next one. I want to bring up plenty of fluid, mouth, the one that ploughs through, sea, vomiting. Next one. And my love is sincere. Next one. See, my one in union with me, irrigate, water. Next one. Then shall my communication take place. This is my little virgin. Next one. See, plough, behave like a simple-minded one. Next one. Plenty of fluid I bring up, plough, with no exclamation mark. All the others had exclamation marks. The next ones do too. Lead away, staggering one, but my love, the abundance of your viscous mud. Then, the final one, my rushing stream, escape from your prison. So there's a whole ton of stuff out there like that. And inevitably, of course, you get it enters the pseudo-archaeological world, and it is read as a message from aliens, of course. I love some of this. So, in many ways, one of the great attractions of these things is that it allows readers to interpret it in whatever way they wish, and boy do they. It's fine, I think. In our archaeological world, I think it's fine if you're, harmless hippie. That's cool. But there can be a sinister side to this. It's not so harmless if you're Heinrich Himmler, and for instance, in which case pseudo-archaeology can become something very different. And in the course, we also look at the settlement of Akrotiri on the island of Santorini, or Thera, which was destroyed in a huge volcanic eruption in the late Bronze Age, which is sometimes linked to the demise. Certainly in the popular media, it's often linked to the demise of the Minoan civilization, and also to Plato's Atlantis story. And that can be really exciting, I think, very entertaining, but also actually quite chillingly dangerous. Hitler wasn't that interested in Atlantis, but Himmler was, interestingly. And he was a great champion of both archaeological and pseudo-archaeological research. But it wasn't just research for research's sake. The context of it is this, in a sense, is that in the 18th century, there'd been a whole host of Atlantis in the North theories. Olof Rudbeck put it in Sweden. Jean-Sylvain Bailly located Atlantis in the Arctic. And then you have, this kind of became allied to Madame Blavatsky's sort of 19th century notions that it was a super advanced civilization. And it was one of what she called the root races of humanity. Into that mix goes Edgar Casey's early 20th century assertions concerning the Atlanteans as astounding advanced technology. And that all tallied really nicely with Himmler's belief that the Aryans were in fact ancient Germans, and that they'd acquired sophisticated scientific knowledge. So he got archaeologists out there instructing them to ascertain whether Atlantis was really the origin of the Aryan supremacy. He was using archaeological things in that way. And for him and his team, turning the Aryans into Atlanteans, or vice versa, it only took a few simple steps. Not convinced by the logic of this, but this is how it worked. The Atlanteans were extremely advanced, it says. The Atlanteans had modern technology before anyone else. Atlantis was in Northern Europe. The historical roots of the 20th century Germans were also in Northern Europe. Therefore, the Germans must be descended from the Atlanteans, be that figuratively or literally. And with that spurious connection duly made, there was a dedicated institute called the Institute of Ancestral Heritage that was set up in 1935 to research and to disseminate scientific evidence for Germany's wondrous history. Like, this is part of it. I guess the fact that Germany's history in the 30s and 40s was often anything but wondrous owes a certain amount to that kind of manipulation of the truth that you sometimes get in pseudoscientific, pseudo-archaeological speculation. That's where it can get. Very important study, I think, carried out by Hannah Arendt, who famously wrote this. She said, the ideal subject of totalitarian rule is not the convinced Nazi or the dedicated communist, but people for whom the distinction between fact and fiction, i.e. the reality of experience, and the distinction between true and false, i.e. the standards of thought, no longer exist. In fact, the dangers of that kind of thinking, I think, were recognised long before that. Since the time of Voltaire, made a very similar point in his own very eloquent way. He wrote this, interesting. He says, "Once your faith, sir, persuades you to believe what your intelligence declares to be absurd, beware lest you likewise sacrifice your reason in the conduct of your life. In days gone by, there were people who said to us, 'You believe in incomprehensible, contradictory, and impossible things because we have commanded you to. Now then, commit unjust acts because we likewise order you to do so.' Nothing could be more convincing," he says. "Certainly anyone who has the power to make you believe absurdities has the power to make you commit injustices. If you do not use the intelligence which God endowed your mind with to resist believing impossibilities, you will not be able to use the sense of injustice which God planted in your heart to resist a command to do evil. Once a single faculty of your soul has been tyrannized, all the other faculties will submit to the same fate. This has been the cause of all the religious crimes that have flooded the earth." So Voltaire. Interesting. The common paraphrase of that, of course, which you get in internet memes, is that those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. He didn't actually write that. But pseudoscience, pseudoarchaeology can enter that kind of territory. It can be very dangerous. Coming back to the disc, there's others, at the completely other end of the more skeptical end of this, have regarded the disc as a forgery. Now we know that Pernia was jealous of the finds that were made by his rival Halbherr at Aya Triada, just by close to Phaistos, and especially Arthur Evans at Knossos. And those finds in the other sites had archives of written documents that Phaistos didn't. So a star quality find might allow Pernia to outshine his rivals. And it would also help him, typical archaeological thing, it would also help him in his quest for funding. This is a big deal. And so as we discovered at the start of what I was saying today, that the circumstances of the excavation of the disc are highly suspect. And the probable presence of a man who's called Emile Guillerion at Phaistos, just on the day of the discovery, fuels some of the doubts, because he is strongly suspected of having forged quite a number of other Minoan artifacts as well. Interesting, there's big question marks. But so the disc has aroused suspicion, and there's a specialist in ancient art forgeries called Jerome Eisenberg, who points out there's quite a lot of anomalies in this that look like stylistic errors that forgers often make. There's a disparity in the style of execution of the elements, disparity in the degree of abstraction of the elements, a unique element of the composition, a unique, inverted commas, style in the sense of the appearance of a fully developed style or type that was hitherto unknown, repeated favoured ancient motifs and devices of the forger, in periods or regions where they don't normally occur, or invented types, reversals of the images, synthesis of geographically disparate styles, correction by elimination, that kind of thing. Interesting. He kind of catalogues those, and people fight back against him. And against that, people suggest that, again, similar symbols, perhaps, on the Arkalochori Axe, as I say, which was discovered after the disc, and also on a ceiling here, this, which is also found later in Phaistos, just has one character. That looks very like what they call the comb sign on the disc, perhaps. There are similarities of those. People are saying, well, maybe not. Maybe there is something about this. That was certainly found in a secure archaeological context in 1955. So there's this big argument about it. Conferences have been held. Calls to conduct thermoluminescence analysis on the disc are resisted by the Greek curators, partly because it's quite destructive. And in any case, there'd be no guarantee of definitive results in any case. So for now, I think the Phaistos disc is a glorious enigma. So, you can see a remarkable object, a fascinating puzzle, and one that's kept and no doubt will keep experts and amateurs busy for many, many years to come. And for me, in our department, we like enigmas. I'm comfortable in this world. Maybe and the possible, for me, have their own innate beauty. So, if you come and study Greek with me, for instance, you'll find that the Greek language, and the Latin language as well, they have different moods. And these include the indicative, where you state something as a fact. So, historians and archaeologists always want facts. It also has a mood called the subjunctive, which you indicate that you would like something to happen, or that you want it to happen, or that given the right kind of circumstances, it could happen. To explain that to my language students, I use the example of my dog, actually. I have a fantastic dog, Hero, an English Springer Spaniel. Breed has nothing to do with it, but Hero lives nearly all of her life, all dogs do this, I think, in the subjunctive mood. She wants to go out for a walk. She's yearning for her supper. She thinks it might be possible I'd throw her the ball. And she lives all in that world of might and possible. And then all of a sudden, joy of joys, it all changes. We go for a walk, we throw the ball, we give her a supper, and she goes straight into the indicative mood for those small periods of time. And then she goes back into the subjunctive mood, sort of wastes away. I want to go for another walk. And the archaeologist, the ancient historian, is just like that, I think. We live for a long time in that world of the subjunctive, of maybe, of possibilities, rather than in indicative actualities. And for me, it's an absolutely beautiful place to live. So I would warmly welcome you in the virtual world or the real one. anytime you like. Thank you. So yeah, just to recap, online you could come and do Greek mythology, full of Rome, Minoans, Mycenaeans, weekly classes in reading Latin literature, Greek literature, barbarian history of Rome. We have a new publication, which is good, so if you want to get advanced reading, Blackwell's have it, I have it, it looks like that. And also the rather wonderful Masters of Studies in Literature and Arts, highly recommended. I think I have leaflets about that if you want an interdisciplinary, wondrous course on that. And in addition to all this, I write and publish, so Barbarians are out. And on Tuesday, I have a new book called Mythologica, which is a fantastic, because of its illustrations, not because of my text, a fantastic book, kids' book on Greek mythology that's coming out on Tuesday. I've got a copy here if you want to come and browse it. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. I'd love